everybody to Go Healthy Live, our first virtual conference. And I'm so excited today because we have a man who actually saved my life, and I know many, many other people's lives as well. He is an amazing guy because when I was 44 years old, that was 33 years ago, I'll be 77 on Monday. He saved my life because I found his book. It was called the 12-Day Program. And I read it from cover to cover, and I couldn't believe what he said. These people got well, what regular doctors would do and what he would do, and then they got well. I thought that makes sense. I'm doing this. So with that, I'm still here at 77. I thank you for that, John. I really owe you my life. I do. The way I was eating.
Linda, you're so kind. You've known me for a long time, and I have to say that the enjoyment I get in life, and I know I beam every time it happens, is by knowing I've helped other people. That's the greatest gift, is to realize that you've helped other people. I'm almost 74.
Yeah, I beat you.
I find myself bragging about that less and less as time goes on.
Yeah.
But I'm fortunate because I have my health, and Mary has her health, and it's nice. In fact, I have to say that probably my life is more exciting, or as exciting. I don't know how you can get more exciting. As exciting as it's ever been in the past. And the past has been filled with all kinds of media events like Larry King Live and just a whole bunch of other events that I did, and sold a lot of books and had a lot of fun. Went around the country, had a chance to talk to a lot of people. And, I really didn't realize that I have another chance to a whole different way of life, and that of course is thanks to COVID-19.
Yeah, yeah.
It's for those who have been able to adapt to the new technology, to the new world. It's been quite encouraging for us. And I have to
Yes.
say that I practiced medicine for a half a century, and for 44 years I ran residential programs where people came and lived with me. And actually, it was 34 years. For 44 years, I've known about the dietary practice of medicine. So I've had a lot of contact with people. I've taken care of over 12,000 people personally.
Not surprised.
It's been a very gratifying and enjoyable professional life. But I'll tell you, Linda, the things that I see as far as opportunities for the world, for personal health development, which is what I've always been interested in. I know you have too. But most importantly, saving planet Earth as our home. I have to tell you, well, I'll go through the presentation and I'll tell you how it all happened. But what I'm most excited about these days is what we can do as far as making a contribution to a very difficult situation, which is making this planet habitable for human beings and hopefully for a lot of species of animals, because we're in big trouble. I know there's a lot of deniers out there. A lot of people would like to have a prettier picture, but I'm going to paint quite an optimistic picture for you as we go through this presentation. There is hope, but it's time to act.
I'm going to tell people what your background is a little bit too, because not everybody knows you. This is Dr. John McDougall we're talking to, my hero. He graduated from Michigan State University College in Human Medicine. He did an internship in Queens Medical Center in Hawaii. He did a residency at the University of Hawaii. He's certified as an internist by the Board of Internal Medicine and National Board of Medical Examiners. But I think something big happened in his life, which started him thinking about his diet. Was when he was only 18 years old, he had a massive stroke, which I think he still has some ramifications today from that. And he also, when in Hawaii, he observed all his elderly patients. All the elderly Hawaiians were doing much better than their offspring, because the elderly people were eating mostly rice and vegetables, and they were trim and healthy, whereas the offspring weren't doing as well, probably getting into some obesity there too. He did a medical, worked as a medical doctor at a sugar plantation in Hawaii. And then in 1986, he launched the most wonderful program, the dietary program at St. Helena. in California. And I know many, many people who've gone there and their lives were saved, absolutely saved. And then he also did a Blue Cross Blue Shield also adopted his dietary program. I don't know if they still do, but they did at one time, right?
That's right. It was Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if it went into any other
Well,
states.
I don't know. It's been a slow progress. I mean, we did this 20 years ago.
Mhm.
So, we've had a chance to work with various companies like Whole Foods Market, and a
Wow.
telecommunication company called Lumen up here in the Northwest. Very
Mhm.
big telecommunication company. We take care of their employees. So there's a lot of interest in our program to make a business more profitable. And as I said, I started to tell you this whole COVID-19 had made us close down our clinic after we've been running inpatient clinics for 34 years.
Yeah.
And, we were kind of at a loss as what to do. And we adapted in August of 2020. We started running telemedicine, telehealth, teleeducation programs. Linda, I'll tell you, they're so much more successful
Isn't
than our
that great?
residential program, and about a third the price. And it's all in-home education, and we have just an amazing support team. Anyway, we've been sold out every program
Yeah.
since we
Oh,
started.
this is so wonderful. People don't have to leave their home, right?
They don't. We get people from Japan and China and India,
Oh,
all over the world.
yeah.
And if you want to
You
remain
probably need
anonymous,
you need to be able to take on even more people. Do you have to add more doctors or what happens there?
well, we may do that. We maybe do that. We certainly have the capacity to run as many as 300 patients at a time,
Eugh.
just with our current staff. And
Yeah.
anyway, it's been really exciting to be able to reach out to so many people and to bring the program in such such an effortless way. I guess that's the way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what's been going on with me, Linda. Getting the program going with my daughter Heather. And
Oh, Heather's been really key
running the
too.
program now.
Yeah.
And I just show up when I'm asked.
That's nice.
But we're
I
just
don't think you'll ever retire though.
we did these 2 days of seminars dedicated to diet and the impact on climate change. And if you haven't seen them, they're look up McDougall and climate change and Mastermind, and that'll bring them right to you. And that were the two different programs, and each of them is it's about somewhere between 6 and 16 hours, depending on which part you look at.
Nice.
But it's a great start. And as we go through the presentation, Linda, I'll explain to you why it's crucial that we start paying attention to the food problem. And if we don't pay attention to the food problem, Linda, it's all over. I don't care
I know.
how many Teslas we build. It's all over. We're going to be talking about today's greatest problems. And I know you'll agree that these are today's greatest problems and how we can deal with them by a self-help approach that really lacks in terms of profit. That's the problem. And that's going veg. Yes, I know, but I want to be clear right up front. This is what you got to do. And I'll explain to you in some detail as to what I believe you have to do. There have been all kinds of problems that I've dealt with as a medical doctor and you've dealt with as a just general citizen. And there are things like diabetes and obesity and heart disease and arthritis. These are known as chronic illnesses. And the way I was trained to deal with these problems as a medical doctor, as a board certified internist, was that there was a pill for every problem. And if it wasn't a pill, it was some type of device or surgical procedure that was going to solve all the problems. And the more high tech it was, the better. That's what we believed. Whereas dealing with these problems, which are called comorbid and premorbid when you're dealing with COVID-19, which we're going to be dealing with in a minute, when you're dealing with these chronic illnesses that affect over 80% of the population, the simple low-tech way to deal with them is exercise and diet and sunshine. And I want to put the big emphasis on diet, not the high-tech approach. Pills don't cure people. The body cures itself. You give it a little advantage maybe from modern medicine, but Not when it comes to chronic disease. You do more harm than good in most cases. The next issue I became involved in, I've spent 44 years taking care of 12,000 people with chronic disease. And that was my sole focus of attention till I had my first grandson. And that was 17 years ago. And I'll tell you, that changed my life. I looked at things completely different. And my new focus of attention was to preserve a home for my children and my grandchildren. You know, I never wanted my children to have to say someday, Grandpa, you knew better. Why didn't you try harder? You know, I'm trying, I think, as hard as I can for the moment, but I'm going to continue to try harder, let me tell you. Well, the way they want us to solve the climate change problems is by some mystical carbon capture program. You know, so fantasy, such a Star Wars, Star Trek approach to problems. Carbon capture, come on, expensive, technically not achievable at the present time. You might as well expect that what's going to happen is aliens from outer space are going to come down here, and as a kindness to human beings, they're going to suck all the carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere and maybe put it on the moon. Who knows? Yeah. You know, people are looking for high-tech solutions when the low-tech approach works. We've known this for 50 years that we had to reduce CO2 production. That means the fossil fuel industry. What most people don't understand, which I'm going to make clear for you in the next few minutes, is that a starch-based diet is crucial as far as solving the climate problems. And, you know, I just can't tell you, you know, how important this is to me because of my family, because of your children. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I was really despondent. I felt hopeless. I, you know, didn't see how we were going to get the attention or solve the problems until something happened which affected all of us worldwide, and that was COVID-19 appeared, and in big time at the beginning of the year, 2020, and it changed everything. Well, just in summary, I can tell you that COVID-19 advanced us by a decade overnight. You know, we changed our behaviors. Well, we stayed at home to work. We increased our telecommunications. We developed telemedicine programs. We've just done so many things that have been positive. But the most important thing, I think, is that we realize that we have the ability to change, and that change must take place, and that we can live through it. And change under our control is better than change that's forced upon us. Well, I want to talk to you about the importance of diet on COVID-19 and the disease itself. And in addition to opening up new opportunities, COVID-19 has caused a tremendous amount of suffering. Yeah. Economically, illness-wise, it's been a real devastation. But you know, there's some lessons to be learned out of that, and I think most important one that hopefully your listeners are paying attention to is the importance of public health measures, like wearing masks, 2 masks. Mary and I have been wearing 2 masks for the last 8 months. Social distancing, not 6 feet, but maybe 26 feet. You need to stop breathing other people's air. Yeah. And we're going to talk about the importance of a starch-based diet in a couple of minutes in terms of COVID-19. You know, I think a lot of you can relate. I'm sure you can, Linda, at age 77, to when we used to have these pandemics, maybe epidemics, certainly, of chickenpox or measles. Yeah. You know, you would have a classroom where one kid would get chickenpox, and you couldn't walk in that classroom for the next 2 or 3 days without catching chickenpox. Yeah. Everybody got it. It's because of the kind of transmissibility. And COVID-19, this virus has a similar ability to transmit itself by having sustained particles in the air, even after people leave the room or the elevator, et cetera. Well, you do what you can in terms of public health measures, and they're very, very important. But I'm also going to talk to you about the importance of a starch-based diet. Many of you have been waiting for the high-tech solution, and that's vaccinations or some kind of drugs that's going to solve the problem. Well, you know what? You're just witnessing some of the problems with vaccinations. Am I going to get the vaccine? Probably. Yes, I think I am. Mary's going to too. Why? Because it's been 10 months since we've held our grandchildren. And we think it's worth the inconvenience and risks for the possible benefit, at least the peace of mind.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, I'm vaccinated, so I'm safer around my family. It's been horrible. But as far as having an effective vaccine, I would not plan on it, not for long term. You're also already seeing variations in the viruses due to genetic drift. And this is a natural thing for viruses to go through, is because they're trillions. I don't know. I don't even know there's a number to express the number of viral particles that exist on planet Earth. But they change. They're just a natural part of selection in nature. Is things change, and some of the changes aren't so good.
What about the future? What about the future pandemics, like from bird and swine flu? I feel like is coming next. That's what I feel.
Well, certainly that we're set up for that, Linda. But it doesn't matter whether you call it a South African variant or a Denver variant or a San Francisco variant of COVID-19. Why don't you just give it a new name? Why don't you call it COVID-20 or COVID-21 or or something else? Why don't you just give it a new name? It doesn't matter. These are different enough viruses, so they're talking about a complete failure of the vaccines that are currently out there. So again, Mary and I are going to get the shot.
Yeah,
we're going to be. I don't want you to overlook that. Because you're interested in what Mary and I are going to do. I know. So the thing is I just want you to know it's not without concern and reservation, particularly the fact that the vaccine won't be of any serious benefit with all the genetic variations that are coming in. In other words, new viruses, Linda. Okay. So what I tried to tell you is that technology will not save us. We need to deal with the basic things like fix the food, get some sunshine, walk around a little bit, stop CO2 production, clean up the environment as much as we can, practice public health measures. And above all, for all these things, you've got to eat a good diet, which is what I want to tell you about.
Yeah.
I want to tell you about how diet is connected. It's the fundamental part of these particular problems. It's the common denominator with chronic illnesses, climate change, and infectious disease. And along with this feedback that's occurring, we also have a lot of other things that are going on, like financial issues, which devastating to our environment, the climate change and chronic illnesses and infectious diseases. And, people's personal appearance is affected by getting sick with either chronic or acute illnesses. You wait till the changes that occur when our society changes. Who knows what'll happen? This affects people's religious beliefs. There's a whole bunch of animal suffering going on, loss of habitat.
Yeah.
Everything is touched, Linda.
I know.
Everything is touched by this particular issue. And you must understand that diet, it's the food, Linda. Diet is the common denominator.
I have the hat. I have your hat. It's the food. I have a jacket.
Right.
It's the food. I
So
wear
let's
it everywhere.
talk about chronic illnesses for a minute. Diet's connection to chronic illness. That's where I've spent the past 44 years of my life, is treating these illnesses. And what I've come down to is a simple message to help people understand what the problem is and what the solution is. They're being poisoned. They're being poisoned by foods that give them illnesses that are more costly, more suffering than all the illnesses caused by tobacco, heroin, alcoholism, etc. Being poisoned. And the foods that are poisoning people must be stopped. And once they're stopped, what happens is the folks heal. These are the food poisons, Linda. They're animal products and also vegetable oils. These are the poison. We're talking about fish. We're talking about chicken, beef, pork, etc., and dairy products.
People think I'm crazy when I tell them about the oil. They kind of understand the rest of it, but the oil thing is so hard.
I know, Linda, but it's certainly defensible easily. Just tell them the fat you eat's the fat you wear. All right, let's talk about some of the diseases related to food poisoning. I just mentioned fat. The fat you eat's the fat you wear. And what we have a population where about 30% of people are obese, and predictions are that in some states in the Southeast, that the obesity rate will be approaching 70%.
Oh.
And we have 80% of the general population that's overweight. And this is overweightness is a reflection of other diseases that are going on too, like diabetes and heart disease and cancer. It's not just being too fat and carrying around some extra
I
pounds.
had those. I had those.
All right, Linda. So diabetes, this is another disease due to food poisoning. I'm going to be talking to you about type 2 diabetes when I mention diabetes, but type 1 is also caused by food poisoning. Diseases of the arteries, which affect the brain, give you a stroke, give you a heart attack. Diseases of the arteries are another manifestation of food poisoning. Various kinds of arthritis, when you inflame the joints due to food poisons, you get rheumatoid, psoriatic, lupus arthritis. It's due to food poisoning. Now, cancers, the breast, colon, and prostate are well discussed by our scientific and health communities as causing cancer. The foods we eat cause colon, breast, prostate, and uterine cancer. And I'm talking about at the very least. It shouldn't be hard for people to relate to food poisoning making the stomach sick or the esophagus. It shouldn't be hard. After all, that's the first stop for the food after you chew it up. And so we have problems such as GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, which is, contrary to popular opinion, not due to purple pill deficiency. GERD is due to the rich Western diet, and this causes all kinds of distress in people, including indigestion, chronic coughs, loss of enamel on the teeth, sinusitis, bronchitis, etc. Anyway, it should be easy to relate to this first stop when it comes to the gastrointestinal tract of the food, and that's the stomach being diseased or being put in good health by the right food. This is an easy one for people to relate to, and that is constipation.
Yeah.
Most people are constipated on the Western diet for sure. And it leads to all kinds of problems like hemorrhoids and hiatal hernias and varicose veins, etc. So the solution is a diet. You may call it a whole food plant-based diet. I guess a lot of people do. Call it a vegetarian, a vegan diet. But I'd like to further define what people should be eating so that they have direction so they can identify the food on their plate.
Yeah.
When I say this is a whole food, plant food-based diet, what am I talking about? Would this be cloves of garlic along with lettuce? No, what the heck am I talking about? Am I talking about eating a couple of bananas with cucumbers every day? That's whole food. That's plant food. Let's be a little bit more directive as far as our instructions go. And to do that, what I must get people to understand is what they eat is mostly starches. You look at successful vegetarian diets, they have a large amount of starch in them, a whole bunch of grains and legumes and wheat and corn and potatoes and breads and pastas and so on. Why? Because you need the calories.
Yeah.
And you have to get starch. If you don't get the starch, then you're never going to succeed. Once you understand that concept of a starch-based diet, then you also understand the place for fruits and vegetables. They're side dishes. They add color, flavor, some nutrients, but they're side dishes. They're never the main dish. You can't live on cucumbers and kale. It's not going to work. I don't care how much you wish it. I don't care how much these gurus out there tell you this is what you're supposed to eat. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no.
So anyway, the traditional diet of people has been a starch-based diet. We'll get onto that in a minute. So let's see the results. Let me just tell you about our research. And, I think this is pretty impressive. We studied over a 10-year period of time, all of our patients, nobody is excluded. We looked at what happened to them on day 1 compared to day 7, which is the outtake where we got new blood tests and weights and so on. And what we found was that in 1,703 patients, nobody is excluded. Everybody is included. That the average weight loss was 3.1 pounds while eating as much food as they wanted, food they really loved. The average cholesterol drop was 22 milligrams per deciliter. The average decrease in blood pressure was 18 over 11 millimeters of mercury, and that is if they started with high blood pressure. And nearly 90% of patients were able to get off their medications, most especially their blood pressure and diabetic medications. So that's an in-house study, and people might criticize, even though it's never been criticized, people might criticize it as being an observational study done by the McDougalls, et cetera. So the medical school up here in Portland called Oregon Health and Science University, they did a study on my work.
Oh.
where what they did was they picked the patients, they designed the study, they randomized the patients, they did follow up on the patients, they collected the data, they wrote the paper. I did nothing except to educate the people. And
Oh,
so they
nice.
came to my 12-day live-in program, and they went back to usually the Oregon, Washington area, and and they followed the diet. And what they reported was 12-month results, Linda, not 7 days,
Wow,
but
that is
12-month
great.
results. The average weight loss was nearly 20 pounds, and that meant they got to eat unrestricted. The average cholesterol level was similar to what we saw in 7 days. It was about 19 milligrams per deciliter. There was a reduction in insulin levels and great improvement in people's fatigue,
Yeah,
which is real troublesome to the people that we're studying, which were people who had multiple sclerosis. But
yeah.
the really surprising thing, at least as far as my principal investigators were concerned, and the faculty at the neurology department at Oregon Health Science University, was the fact that people followed the program. Compliance. They complied to the program.
Well, the
85%
starch makes you feel good.
Well,
The
yeah,
starch makes you feel good.
and plus it tastes good. Plus they get tremendous benefits. That's why they were with it. 85% of people were compliant with the program over 12 months.
Mhm.
That's unheard. You can't get people to take their blood pressure pills or their cholesterol drugs.
Yeah.
All right. So
Excellent.
further independent study. The OHSU study was completely independent, except for me educating them. Let's go halfway around the world to New Zealand and look at some research done there in a community setting in New Zealand. I didn't even know this was going on, except these researchers, they identified the diet that they used as the McDougall Diet. And what they did is they set up a community experiment similar to the one that I did in my residential living programs. Is they had these people in the community follow the diet. They gave educational sessions that people went to. But the average weight loss, and they brag about this, they showed the greatest weight loss of any program sustained over a year. And of course, they didn't mention me, which, had similar results to what I got, 25-pound weight loss at the end of a year. But remember, no limit on the amount of food. You weren't told to, you weren't told to exercise. All the things that people say are the cause of weight loss or weight gain does not apply. It's the food.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were able to reduce their medication usage by a lot, and they also followed the program with the attendance rate in the evening sessions of nearly 80%. In other words, almost exactly the same results that we published in the other two programs, Linda. Now, there's consistency here. Nobody's going to come out and do a study, at least an honest one. Nobody's going to come out and do a study that uses our principles and gets anything different than the results that we get.
Yeah.
It's like, anyway.
I lost 50 pounds eating
All right,
12 potatoes a day.
Let me tell you why the program works. It's by taking and stopping the food poisons. It's just like when you stop somebody from smoking cigarettes, they stop coughing, they stop wheezing. They no longer are short of breath, at least, to a point. But if you keep this injury up, what happens is the body gets to a point where it starts showing chronic illness, unreversible illness, emphysemas, cancers, etc. And that's because the repeated injury of 20 to 40 cigarettes a day outpaces the body's ability to heal itself. Linda, the body never stops healing. It's always trying. Even in this particular example of the smoker, and the smoker is coughing the poisons out, and mucus is dragging the poisons out. The body never stops healing. What we need to do is to reduce the injury, stop the injury.
Yep.
And of course, with most of the problems that you and I have addressed over the years, you've addressed with your community, are injuries of the fork and spoon, delving into the cholesterol and fat and other garbage that people eat. But it's just that simple. It's not anything. It's a miracle, I'll tell you. That's not anything that's not understandable by the general population. If you stop the repeated injury, then your healing capacities can catch up. It's kind of like if you poured acid on your hand, say you poured acid on your hand every day, and you decided that you were going to stop the injury, guess what would happen? You'd heal.
Yeah.
You have no doubt about it. You'd heal. But if you kept pouring the acid on your hand, guess what? Disease would progress.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about climate change in terms of diet. Again, the same issues affecting it as well. It's every place. The consequences are every place. We talked about cost effectiveness. Oh, how could anything be cheaper than saving our home? I was turned on to the climate change subject by Al Gore, as most of you were. It has lectured The Inconvenient Truth. One of the things that stood out for me, as I'm sure many of you, is that in this Inconvenient Truth, and nor in the sequel that was put out in 2017, was diet mentioned.
Yeah, I
How
know.
could you ignore such an obvious thing as the food? Well, I have my reasons for why I think Al Gore ignored it, but they're not really important. Not really important. At the same time, in 2006, the World Food Bank sponsored a study which came out through the World Health Organization, and what they did is they studied the effect of agriculture on our climate, and they came to the conclusion in this 407-page document that the livestock industry was a greater polluter in terms of greenhouse gases than transportation. It's the greatest polluter of all, according to the World Health. This is correctable. We can fix this. Well, I wrote my first newsletter on this subject back in 2006, so it was 15 years ago. Yeah, so I've been interested in this a long, long time. And I identified the issues of diet and where I felt Al Gore had missed his message and still misses his message. It's not just Al Gore.
Did you send it to Al Gore?
Pardon?
Did you send it to Al Gore? You need to send that to Al Gore.
Oh, Linda, it's people find things on their own. Anyway, by and large, and I want to make this point, I want all of your listeners to realize this is nobody's really talking about the diet connection, which we're going to be talking about in just a minute. You have even Greta Thunberg. She admits to being vegan, but she doesn't push it. Nobody is really talking about the diet issues. Now, I realize this is in part because the scientists and the politicians implementing these particular findings, they can't see beyond their own dinner plate. And as a result, we're not getting the kind of messages that we should be getting. So until that changes, until the financial rewards go where they should go towards doing the right thing, then it's not going to be fixed. But things are changing. There's hope. Just after the World Health Organization's report came out, Livestock's Long Shadow, another group called the World Watch Institute, they reanalyzed the UN report, and they saw some glaring omissions, and they corrected the figures and came out with an estimate that over 51% of the greenhouse gases are produced by the livestock industry. So I think this is a more authoritative report. Robert Goodland, who spoke at our Advanced Study Weekend in 2013, a really competent man, to say the least. And he told us in 2013 that, we barely had any time left. He said, we got 3 more years. Well, whether we got 3 years or 12 years or whatever, we're not going to stop trying.
Right.
Because I believe we can fix this. I really do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be wasting our time together. The Lancet Commission, they came out in 2019 and told us that if we're going to save the planet, we have to fix the food and eat vegetables and grains and legumes and nuts and limit the meat. That was the problem with this group, is they're still one of those compromises where they excuse those who are irresponsible and doing the damage to our environment. And like I say, probably they can't see over their own dinner plate, because they really gave watered down recommendations for what is necessary. The Lancet Commission, a side study that they did, which was published in March of 2020 from the Lancet Commission, is they said that if people change to a vegan diet, they could cut the production of greenhouse gases by 50%.
Oh,
Try and remember
wow.
some of these figures, 50%, 51%, 14%, 18%, whatever. They're all important to deal with. But the consensus, though, is in general that the environmentally polluting parts of our diet are the animal foods. And even fish farming is a tremendous polluter. And where we
Oh,
get the most benefit in terms of calories and protein, et cetera, efficiency, good health, wow, is in eating basic starches
yeah.
such as beans and corn and potatoes and rice and wheat. I mean, these are traditional foods of people. That's what human beings have always eaten up until recently.
Mhm.
So there's the Lancet findings: 50% reduction in greenhouse gases if we switched from an animal-based to a starch-based diet. Yes, that's right. All right. So research, when it looked at it from another point of view, from the consumer's point of view, it tells us that we could reduce greenhouse gases overnight, depending
Mm,
upon the participation, by up to 80% by going vegan. Yeah, so what is the figure? 20%, 18%, 50%, 51%, or 80%?
yeah.
They're all we're striving for.
Yeah.
So how do we do this? Well, Mother Earth is just like my patients, Linda. Mother Earth is always trying to heal herself. And we unfortunately dish out so much injury that the planet can't keep up. And it's on a very, very rapid downhill course, which we've got to change. And cutting out greenhouse gases is essential. And there are people who are in the administrative part of our government these days that are talking about stopping the fossil fuel industry. This is the only sane talk I can think of.
Yeah.
Stop the insanity, folks.
Yeah.
Stop the insanity. We're talking about our home.
Mhm.
Good grief. All right. So anyway, let's give Mother Earth a chance, and we don't really give it a chance that it deserves until we focus on diet. So let's talk about diet and infectious diseases. That's what's really got us focused on what I think is important, which is primarily saving our home and secondarily saving people personally, which I've tried to do as a doctor for half a century, and
Mhm.
particularly in the last 44 years, where I practice only dietary therapy. 44 years of doing that. Wow. Okay. Let's talk about how COVID-19 has propelled us ahead a decade at least in change. And that was overnight. You saw how the world, not just the United States, but and more effectively in other countries, people changed. They all wore masks. They
Yes.
stopped going out to eat. They stopped flying on airplanes. They went home and made their home their place to be, not the office, and had all kinds of home education and home business, and a lot of that was good. So things have changed. People don't commute as much, and we saw a 10% reduction in greenhouse gases due just to these passive events.
Yeah.
Nobody really came out and said, hey, we're going to do something real serious. All right. Why is diet connected to COVID-19? Well, this was first discovered before the virus came to the United States or Europe. It was discovered in China that people in China, and there are a lot of overweight, sick, diabetic people in China, so you don't have to look far these days. People in China who had cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancers, et cetera, they had a much greater risk of going on to the serious side of COVID-19. For
Mm.
most people, it can be asymptomatic. For the other part of most, it can be, it could be of mild symptoms, certainly nothing troublesome for them. But for a lot of people, and of course, this is a high percentage of people, what happens is it's not just a mild disease. People say things like, I never realized it could be this bad. Or often they'll say to the attending person in the ICU, I'm going to die, aren't I?
Yeah.
This is real serious. Whether or not you end up in the hospital on a mechanical ventilator, fighting for your breath for the 2 weeks before you die, and you will die. There aren't that many people that get off those ventilators. So, they brag about them. Anyway, you don't want to be in that category. So what do you have now? If you're paying attention, you have public health measures, masks, social distancing, washing hands, public health measures. But that's all you got, unless you understand what we're trying to teach, Linda. And that is that people can go from a high risk of having serious illness to a very low risk. And the CDC came out and told us this in June. They told us that people who have premorbid conditions, those are the conditions that we cure with the McDougall diet: obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease. The fundamental care of these premorbid conditions, and you get rid of them, is by fixing the food. Well, people who don't get rid of them, which are most Americans, they have 6 times the risk of hospitalization and 12 times the risk of death. In Britain, they know this too. So they know this all over Europe. The British Medical Journal, the editor told us that we need diets richer in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes to reduce the chance of going on to serious illness.
Yeah.
So how does diet affect the entry of virus into the body? Well, whether or not you have an effective gut barrier, we're talking about the contents of the gut, also a respiratory barrier. We're talking about the contents of the lungs and airways. Whether you have an effective barrier in these two vital areas has to do with, well, how well you eat. If you eat a horrible diet, then you crush the barrier. It becomes ineffective. You eat a healthy diet and you have a strong barrier. There are also all kinds of phytochemicals. And you could spend a whole lecture, probably a whole day, telling people about the different types of names that I can hardly pronounce that are in plants that help save you. But the real miracle is in the whole basic diet. It's eating a diet based on starches, beans and corn and potatoes and rice and wheat, these things, breads and pastas and these kinds of things. That's the fundamental. Shouldn't be focused on, well, am I going to get a certain amount of this phytochemical in this particular plant? Wasting your time. Starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables. One of the more interesting findings is how this virus is crossed from the blood into the lungs and other tissues. And the way that the virus crosses is through a membrane between the blood and the tissues. And this membrane has certain receptors. They're called ACE2 receptors. These ACE2 receptors are what we call lipid rafts or bridges. This is where the virus attaches. You see the CoV2? The virus attaches to the ACE receptor, the ACE2 receptor, and transitions between the blood and the tissues through this particular gateway. Well, those people who have high cholesterols in their body end up building more bridges and wider bridges so that more viruses pass through into the tissues. And it's even been recognized by my colleagues, who love to push drugs, that taking statin drugs, which lower cholesterol, reduce the risk of getting severe disease by 30 to 50%. Well, I can tell you, by doing it with a good diet, your reduction of your risk of getting serious disease is even more dramatically reduced. So how do we lower cholesterol? I showed you some of our data, like from the study of 1,703 people of our 10 years of patients. The average drop in cholesterol is 22 points. That happens in 7 days.
Wow.
Really high cholesterols get even faster and greater reduction. So, the point I'm trying to make here, Linda, is that, it'd be great if you started the program 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, like you and I did. It'd been great, but even up to the point of where you're sick, I think it makes sense to change, because in 7 days we show profound improvements. It takes a week or two for you to start going downhill, and sometimes longer. So, now is the time to start. Let's go.
It's never too late to start, is it?
Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about now, Linda, is people are going to say, okay, everything you said is true and interesting, but it's not relevant because nobody will follow this program. We'll talk to you about that for a minute. Let's go back 100 years to World War I. And we'll go to Western Europe and the North Sea. And what we have here in this situation is we have England setting up a blockade so that the Germans could not get anything, including food. And that blockade was very effective. It's so effective that it also blocked the Danes from getting food. The people in Denmark, because they were covered by this particular battleground, the people in Denmark were deprived of food. Now, during this period of time, during World War I, over 400,000 Germans died of malnutrition-related problems. But it was a different experience in Denmark because of this man. His name was Mikael Hinhede, and Dr. Hinhede was a very famous nutritionist at that time, who, by the way, had come to the conclusion that the protein intake in a human being is so low that we don't even need to consider it in any dietary recommendations. Well, Hinhede was good friends with the Danish government, and when World War I came along, and they could see that there was going to be tremendous food shortages and starvation, what Dr. Hinhede recommended was that what they do, instead of restricting the amount of food, is they change the source of food from the animals to the foods that the animals ate. So they let the animals die. And they, instead, the soybeans and the grains and root vegetables and so on, that the animals had been eating. So in that particular time, if you were a pig farmer, maybe you got an occasional piece of pork. If you were one of the richest people in Copenhagen, you got a piece of beef once in a while. That was the dietary restriction that occurred during the blockade during World War I. And this was published, the results was published in the Journal of American Medical Association in 1920.
Wow.
And what they show is the effect of dietary restriction on the health of people, the Danish people. And what they found is that overall reduction of illness by 34%. It was the lowest death rate that had ever been experienced.
Wow.
Okay, these are death rates, the lowest death rate that ever been experienced in the Danes before and after this time. Now, what I want you to know is the purple line indicates kind of a downward slope, and these would be infectious diseases that we're looking at, not just chronic illnesses, not just the obesity and diabetes and heart disease and so on that we've been talking about initially, but also there was a trend towards infectious diseases. Mm-hmm. All that was available back in that time were public health measures, which, by the way, are the same as the standards we use today. People wore masks, they did social distancing, they did contact tracing. They had no vaccines, but they were working on various kinds of treatments. And still at that time, estimates are as high as 50 million people died worldwide of the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
And lots of comparisons have been made between COVID-19 and Spanish flu. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the risk of death in various European countries at that time. At the time when 3 million Danes went vegetarian, nearly vegan, they had the lowest death rate from Spanish flu of any of the European countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So can people change? Well, Linda, just in our lifetime, because you revealed your age, and I did too, we've seen people change. You remember the time when you go out to lunch or dinner and half the people at the table would be smoking. Yeah. I remember when I would go into the doctor's lounges, usually I have to cut the air with a knife. Everybody was smoking, even in the surgical lounge. Smoke. It was socially acceptable. In fact, you were weird if you didn't smoke. Yeah. Well, this was changed with Luther Terry back in 1964 when he published the Bible on this, on smoking and health in the United States. And the result was as the people changed their behavior to where half the population smoked, now fewer than 18% smoke. And these are, by the way, mostly blue-collar workers, poorly educated people with lots of social disadvantages, and young women. Anyway, C. Everett Koop, he came along and did his report back in the 1990s, and he did the report on nutrition and health, trying to mirror what Luther Terry had done with cigarettes and health, and smoking and health. And what he told people is they needed to reduce their intake of beef and chicken and pigs. Yeah. And people changed. Well, not much, because industry fought back. So the changes that should have been welcome should have happened. It didn't happen. Well, part of the reason is that back then only half the population was under the influence of the bad habit. Today, 99.9% of the people are still involved with the killing diet. Well, then that may not true. I mean, if you look at the figures that say 3% of the world is now vegan, well, maybe 90, only 97%. You know, and besides that industry, if you compare the size of industries, the tobacco industry versus the food industry, you know, the tobacco industry is minuscule. But, you know, even though you could fill a small library with the research on tobacco, and by the way, none of it was done with randomized controlled trials. It was all observational.
Oh, yeah.
You could fill a whole library with information on the effects of tobacco poisoning. And I can fill a library 100 times bigger on the effects of food poisoning caused by the rich Western diet.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point being is people do change.
Yeah.
And the day may come when you look at the table next to you and you go, it probably does for you. It certainly does for me. What a disgrace. What a social disgrace. You are just disgusting. And I didn't even smell their food. All right. Well, I want you to consider COVID-19 as the comet that wakes us up. If, for example, there was a real comet hitting for Earth, then the Chinese, the people from India, those from Bolivia, Costa Rica, every place, they'd get together to try and build that defensive weapon to save our planet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 virus infection is the comet that needs to wake us up. You know, before we end up having this discussion when Florida is under 20 feet of water. We can't wait that long.
No.
And we can't rely upon, you know, mystical, high-tech Star Wars type solutions. They're not going to save us. We have to do the basic stuff. And that basic stuff includes fixing the food, fixing the diet. And we do that with a starch-based diet, which happens to be vegan. And you reduce the oil for all kinds of reasons, but it's a real simple message to understand. So the connection is there between diet. Diet is the common denominator. We fix the food. We fix our greatest challenges that are affecting us in the upcoming centuries, Linda. It's just crucial.
Yeah.
It's too bad. Too few people listen in the past, but it's not going to continue that way, Linda. You and I are going to go out. We're going to open some eyes and uncover some ears, and we're going to get people to listen because it's just crucial that they understand this message. And I hate to sound like a fanatic, but I am. All right. So anyway, if you want to find out a little bit more about what we're doing, I would encourage you to go to YouTube, look at McDougall and climate change, and Mastermind is the conference that we gave, which is 2 days of conference about diet and its impact on climate and why diet is so crucial. And it's a great free seminar. And you can do that. And then you can go to our website, which is drmcdougall.com. And you can learn about our various programs and things that we're doing and our messages and all kinds of things about health and nutrition. And you can also learn about our 12-day live-in telemedicine, telehealth program, which has been hugely successful. And that success can be turned around into your life too. It's not just been for us it's been successful. The patients will tell you that this has been an improvement over the residential program at a third of the cost.
Yeah.
Oh, and you don't even have to go anyplace. You could sit in your home in Moscow.
Well, we can help more people now that way. That's just wonderful. There is a one good side to the COVID, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of good sides, actually, Linda. You know, you have to live with the disasters put in front of you. And you either bend and meet the times or you perish. You know, I know a lot of people have perished. I know it's not their fault.
I know. It's a wake-up call for everybody. It's been a wake-up call to reassess your life. I don't know about you, but I thought more, and since COVID started, I thought more about death than I ever have in my life. I never even thought about death ever. I just didn't. And so now I actually think about what I want to do in the short time I have left, even greater. You know, it seems even more important. And that was because of COVID.
Well, Linda, you have a very effective message. And so I would just encourage you to keep the drum rolling, Don't stop.
Okay, well, I've got my Bible, the Starch Solution. I have it with me at all times. I hand it out to everybody, and all my clients have to read it, and they have to know the whole thing, and I have to ask them questions at the end
Yeah,
to make sure they understand the concepts that yes, you can have starch and you can actually take off the extra weight, because I ate 12 potatoes a day and I lost 50 pounds. So,
effortlessly and painlessly.
John, thank you so much.
All right, Linda, thanks for
inspiring me even more and the whole world, and getting the whole connection between climate change and COVID and your diet has just been fantastic.